Hi, welcome to my channel. Here today I want to kick things off by really showing the showcase of how this workshop sort of came to be. And that first big project was redoing kind of the whole infrastructure electrical system. And that seems like a weird first video for a channel of all sorts of kind of stuff, but it's just sort of how it worked out. I'm going to walk you through kind of my whole process, all the way through, get it inspected, and I hope you enjoy it. So what I started with was this liquid-tight conduit running a piece of romex wire into my detached garage here. And from there on out, it just sort of spaghetti splays all across this space. And as this shows, it wasn't great. It kind of was giving me nightmares about what sort of fire hazard some of this wiring was doing. So what I'm planning on doing is here's inside my house, there's a unused 6-gauge dryer cable already running kind of along the rafters. And this old dryer vent is a space that I'm going to use. And I'll just place a breaker box here back in the garage. And that will be sort of the landing spot for a new line. This project was kind of done in 2 steps. One step was to sort of rewire the whole garage, fixing all the wiring in the garage, updating the switches, making sure that outlets had faceplates and switches had faceplates and so on and so forth, that the gauge of the wire was all correct. And then once that was all done, the next step that I went through was getting the actual line from the house ran. So we're going to show that next. So now that the breaker panel is installed, I have rerun new wires across the ceiling of the garage, sort of giving me better outlet access. I forgot to mention, this garage was pretty much all on a single circuit, and so the light switch would switch all the outlets off, and that made it really difficult if I wanted to leave, say, a battery charger plugged in or had something else running and someone flipped the light switch. So I reran new romex cable to all of these outlets, separate from the switch, and the switch is off of a separate line that is using the outlets on the ceiling that I can plug lights into. And you can see there that I have different gauge wire, one for the 20 amp circuit and one for the 15 amp circuit that the lights will be on. So these are 2 new ceiling outlets that I can have lights plugged into, and they're all controlled by the switch. Before, there were some hardwired lights that had the old cloth bound wiring. This is one of the original lights that I repurposed and rewired, and they were all using this cloth wiring that I had. It was sort of like a tin coated aluminum wire in a cloth cable that I think is from the 70s.
Alright, I'm out here working on getting this driveway prepped. My plan is to remove this old dryer vent and build out some framing so that I can put a new junction box in there and then run it into the driveway, and then we'll drill and cut a hole way over here and then run it up into the side of this building. And then once that's done, we'll come in over here, go across, and into subpanel. And this wire will go away.
So I hadn't really ever gone really into cutting into asphalt. My driveway's an asphalt driveway, and so what it ended up doing was, here in Portland we have a tool library, and one of the tools that they have for rent is a diamond blade worm drive saw for masonry. And so that's what I used, and basically I chopped a line between the 2 points that I wanted to cut. And another trick that I sort of learned from watching people do it on YouTube was a leaf blower to sort of direct the dust and gas, which fills the space really quickly. Make sure you're wearing all sorts of lung protection that you can. I wish I had had a respirator, but I didn't. I just had it in N95 mask. And as I will learn later, and you'll see later in this video, I regretted not making my trench wider. There's really no reason that it needs to be narrow. It's pretty easy to patch at the end of the day, but if you have to go deep, you'll want to have that space. So here is a look at the trench. You can see that I had some trouble along the buildings where the saw couldn't get quite close enough, and afterwards I tried to saw down the inside of the cut to help cut out some of the concrete that was underneath the asphalt. It didn't work very well, so I resorted to the old hand tools of pickaxe and sledgehammer. And it ended up with me spending a lot of time taking a lot of breaks and basically filling a lot of buckets with broken concrete and rock. And then I was able to finally get to soil, and I just had to use a trowel because, again, as I've said several times, this trench was too narrow. Now, why don't I take a minute here and explain what my plan is? I'm going to be digging a hole to run the 4 wires from the house, 2 hot, 1 neutral, and 1 ground. My goal is to support a 100 amp breaker box in the detached garage. In order to do that, I decided to go with number 2 gauge aluminum, mainly for the price. I could have done a thicker gauge copper for the same level of current, but copper is more expensive than aluminum. And I also really wanted to try to do a direct bury. And your local big box store should sell something called an underground service entrance wire, or sometimes it's called an RV wire. That is just a direct burial, number 2 aluminum. And you can use those, and they'll support up to 100 amps. The trick with a direct bury wire is it needs to be 24 inches if you want to bury it outside of conduit. And as I started digging this, I decided maybe I didn't want to go all the way to 24 inches because that's quite a bit deeper than 18 inches, which is all you need to go when you are burying wire in conduit. You'll see as we go along that different things come up as I dig this trench that make me kind of go back and forth, but this is just to sort of give you a heads up from where I'm coming from. And then running into the ground will be conduit, and it's 1 1/4 inch sized conduit, which I measured on a wire measuring calculator to make sure that I didn't overfill my conduit. I'll link the products that I used and the calculator that I used for conduit measuring in the video description so that you can figure out what you want to do if you're going to try to do this yourself. And now let's get a little update on my progress.
Alright, thought I'd do a little update mid-trench dig here. My trench is mostly dug all the way through here, where it'll come up and into, I will be removing this old unused dryer vent, kind of cleaning that up, building a little spot to put this junction box. Something like that. Right now, what I'm doing is going along with a little test piece to conduit to measure, because the conduit the top of the conduit needs to be at least 18 inches. And so I'm going along looking for any high spots in my trench. I wish I had made this a wee bit wider because my arm gets pretty banged up reaching down in there. But here we are. Update on the update. So this pipe is right where I need to go. It's right at the depth that I needed that conduit to go. And I don't think I can fit the conduit underneath it. So, in addition to struggling maneuvering this heavy of a wire all through this, I think I'm going to go back to my original plan, which was direct bury, which is why I got the wire I got. It just means I have to dig to 24 inches. Which means going underneath the pipe.
Let's take a little break from watching me dig a trench and talk about some other stuff. So here I am drilling a hole to have the conduit exit the garage. Now, I didn't have quite a big enough hole saw. I had a hole saw that's an inch and a quarter, but you need a slightly bigger hole saw size. Depending on what size conduit, you can look up what size hole saw you will use. So you'll see here what I end up doing once I punch through the siding. I use a like a Dremel tool essentially and just buzz out a slightly larger circumference to help get the conduit in. Once I have a hole cut, I'm going to be adding a elbow junction, which will take the straight piece of conduit coming right off of the side of my breaker box and go down into my trench.
Some updates. I got my trench dug to 24 inches. I got my first wire run through here all the way to the bigger box. I had planned on using regular breakers, but then I realized you needed GFI breakers in a detached building because of the potential for moisture. So I got those put in here. It's my first time using those, so these will connect to the neutral bus bar. I have this expansion slot for the service ground, which will probably be the next one I run to try to fit in through here. Okay. But right now, I'm working on getting this all set up. So this will come here. I'll need a block that can hold it, and then this junction box set up here. And I'll be showing more of that once I get that set up.
So now begins the second leg of the physical labor involved in this project. I should say up front, I have never done this before. I've never pulled a cable through a conduit. I have wired up outlets in my house. I have wired up all this stuff in this workshop. I have navigated wiring through walls and through difficult to reach places. I have learned a few tricks here and there with getting a wire to feed through a difficult spot. Nothing have I done that is as difficult as getting this through this conduit. Now, I think there are definitely some lessons learned here. I probably would have been better off going up than going down. I had to send more cable up through the whole system than if I had just gone the other way. I don't think I would have had to push quite as much cable through the whole dang process. Now, I don't know for sure, but that's just a guess I have here in retrospect. And you'll see here in a little bit that after doing this for a while, I decided that maybe I needed to change some stuff up.
Okay, major breakthrough. Here I am, bleeding, dirty, sweaty. But I was able to get all 4 wires down through the hardest section of conduit. So now I just have to finish pulling them and then run to my soon-to-be box.
All right, I am changing it up a little bit. I have been working on the last... Oh, let's see if I can get the right thing to focus. I've been working on getting the last 2 wires into my conduit. And the conduit comes down here, comes out into the trench, comes under mystery pipe, comes down through here, re-enters this conduit, up through here. And I have the final 2 that I'm pushing into here. And I made it like 2/3 the way through this. And I'm really getting stuck getting this in there. I'm starting to kind of worry that I'm going to break this piece of conduit. And also, I think I have hurt my shoulder trying to pull it. So, we're going to try using lubricant. And why didn't I use this earlier, you say? Well, I didn't have it earlier. Was it hard to find? No, not at all. Should I have bought it earlier? Shut up. Here goes. Again, really no plan at all as to how this is going to work or what I'm even doing here. I basically take this gel lubricant and just start dumping a whole heck load into my conduit and lubricating the wire as it went in, lubricating the wires as they came out, trying to get it up in where the elbows were. And I gotta say, it did make a big difference. Still a ton of work getting this all the way through, but this lubricant really saved my bacon. Whereas before, I was basically struggling for an hour at a time to get maybe a foot of movement. I was able to get the same amount of movement in maybe 10 minutes with this lubricant, although still required a lot of force to get it in there.
So here's what we have. The wire coming out of the box, through the trench, into my junction box here. I'm using these Polaris. I've heard them described as like a Polaris style connector. They are these insulated multi-connector. I needed something that could handle the large gauge of my feeder wire and could support both copper and electric, since I'm coming from copper out of the house. Copper and aluminum. So those, and then this oversized outdoor box to support, because these are pretty hefty. The way these work, if you've never seen them, is there are these little Allen key tops, and you can plug those up, and then that loosens a bolt, and the bolt is filled with a compound to help the aluminum from oxidizing. And so The final step then is getting this breaker box all configured. This large gauge aluminum, super difficult to deal with. I know I wanted to do this oversized so I wouldn't have to do it again, but if I ever do have to do this again, I'm definitely going to reconsider this size of wire. My GCI breakers are connected to the neutral bus, and then my equipment ground, and then my grounding rod is this copper wire, which is running along outside the house. I might need to get another one of these adapters for this grounding rod because it is pretty big. And I'm struggling to get it in there, but I'm just going to do a quick fire test to make sure that I didn't swap anything that I didn't expect to swap. One of the struggles is that all these wires are identical and they don't keeping track of them all through here was a little bit of a challenge, and I did my best to then I used a voltmeter and tested connectivity to try to double check everything, and then marked the ones that I thought were my positive lines to connect up to the positives coming from the house. But there's always a chance that I got one of those backwards, so I guess we'll find out here in a minute if my main breaker inside trips or something catches on fire. I suppose would be another worst case scenario. And then, so once that's done, I then have to undo the shoddy original wiring from the house, get to remove all that, actually connect it to this new breaker box, and that'll be pretty straightforward. The last major step then is to finish the grounding rod installation. I have 2 grounding rods. I don't know if I will need to, but I figured I might as well assume I will need to. So here's one that's almost all the way in, right here, and then 6 feet away I have a second one that I started installing, and then I'll need to connect the two and hope for the best. Alright, so most of this is all done. I sealed up the old connection just until I can get a chance to remove it. This is all ready for inspection. And lastly, the grounds are all buried. Another one. And now, we just wait for the inspector. Alright, well, it's all done. He came by, he approved it, I got my sticker. The inspector had 2 provisional issues that he wanted knocked out, and he said I can take those and then email him. And I've already done them, so that's how fast they were. Basically, he wanted the ground and the neutral marked with tape, so I had to go get colored tape, green tape for the ground, white tape for the neutral. White tape wasn't hard to find. Green tape, a little more difficult to find, but I managed to find some. So that went on there, that went on there. The other issue was I had not marked my breakers, so he asked for that to be done, and that's it.
Thanks for watching. If you stuck around this long, I really appreciate it. And if you would like and subscribe this channel, I would be forever grateful. Most of the stuff that I'm going to show here is not going to be home renovation projects. We're going to be doing some experimentation. I have a bunch of different ideas I want to try. I don't really think I would call myself an expert on any of these categories, but I am excited to learn about them. And I feel like using this channel as a medium to sort of tell that story of learning the process will hopefully be fun for people to watch. And I'm glad you're here. Thanks.